Hello and welcome to Shop Talk, where we talk all things Scottsdale PD. You're in for a real treat today as we're talking about one of everyone's favorite topics, dogs. Here are your hosts, Chief Jeff Walther and Commander Chris Coffey.
Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Shop Talk with Chief Jeff Walther. Excited to be with you again this month. A lot of great stuff going on since we were with you last month. I have Commander Chris Coffey as my trusty sidekick. I got a great show for you today. I'm gonna talk a little bit about some social media stuff here in a minute, and been getting a lot of questions about Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and the mass shooting that went on there. So I'm going to talk briefly about those two before we get with our great guest, Dr. Wayne Svoboda, who is our vet for all of our canines, and he's got a lot of great information for us.
And has been for about, I think, going on 30?
About 30 years.
30 years.
30, wow.
30 years.
Yeah. So, and another reason we have Chris on today is, and Chris was a canine handler and sergeant of the canine unit many moons ago. Before rising through the ranks and to his exalted level now, the executive
like
staff.
That.
Yeah,
exalted. I like that.
So we'll get into that here momentarily. And like I said, Chris has some great connectivity with the doc, and we got a lot of good questions.
Great questions.
So let me talk about a couple issues before we get rolling into that. I know that our listeners are used to the number of questions that come in or sending questions in that I answer about law enforcement, about Scottsdale PD, about our mission, about the things that we do, and get a lot of photo radar questions, which I always love. But there are two pressing issues that I wanted to talk about just very briefly before we get into our guest today. The first is social media. And, social media, however you look at it, is either an incredible, some will look at it as an incredible tool of communication and expression. Others, like me on occasion, will look at social media and say it is the bane of our existence and really causing some division between people. And so regardless of how you look at it, and I welcome all opinions on that, we're starting to see some things here in the police department that are very concerning. And I'll share with you just two brief stories. Actually, I'll share with you three brief stories and how we can positively impact this. One is that I heard from some of our council members about a posting on Nextdoor related to a story that somebody had posted that said that, kind of be careful out there. There was an attempted carjacking between the Yo Pauli's Pizzeria and the Fry's Food Store at 90th Street in Via Linda that involved three suspects, and they described the suspects as three migrant or Mexican teens from the migrant transition facility at Scottsdale Road in Shea, and that during this attempted carjacking of a 60-year-old man, the 60-year-old man was stabbed with a box cutter a couple times, and he wound up defending himself and knocking out the suspect. That suspect was ultimately taken into, allegedly in the story, taken into custody by us, and then turned over to ICE. The other two teens fled, and then the victim was treated for those stab wounds. That never happened, folks. Somebody made that up on social media. That crime did not occur in any way, shape, or form. We investigated that report fully. We never got a call on that. We never got any information on that. That call was made up. We were able to find somebody who posted that, and they were less than cooperative with us in wanting to provide us who she was talking about. And so that case fell by the wayside. I had my violent crimes unit do some my intelligence unit do some exhaustive research in it, and I'm happy to tell you that did not happen. And so our assumption, because we can only assume based on the information that we had and provided by the person who made the post, that it was there to sow the seeds of discontent amongst our populace related specifically in this case to Mexican migrant teens at the transition facility, which, by the way, closed as a migrant transition facility at the end of December last year. So some time ago, before it quickly transitioned to an Afghan refugee facility, which also then closed and moved some of those refugees in April. So I wanted to share that story with you, and I'll wrap it up in a second with that and some of my thoughts on that. The second one was an alleged traffic stop that allegedly took place with my officers in an African-American young man that didn't sound good when I heard about it from a community source that said, hey, this is circulating social media. And allegedly somebody who, not the young man himself, but somebody secondhand put the information out that said that this person was stopped because of the color of their skin, detained for a period of time, asked some inappropriate questions, and then sent on their way for doing 4 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. Obviously, it garnered some social media attention with a lot of negative comments toward my officers and toward the police department. I immediately put internal affairs on the case to see, what the issue was, and my goal is always to be extremely, extremely transparent. And if we do wrong, I'm all over it. My folks are all over it, and so we looked into that. We tried to reach out to this young person, and that person refused to talk to us. And ultimately, what we found out, you got to remember, in today's technological society, all my police vehicles are GPSed. I have on body cameras. You have to call into your traffic stops. My dispatchers know where you are and what you're doing based on that technology. And what we learned very quickly was that too, like the previous story, never happened. We were unable to confirm. There was no traffic stops in the area that was claimed. We reviewed on-body camera footage. We looked at GPS data, and then we attempted to contact the person who alleged to another person. Now, mind you, he did nothing wrong. He didn't put this on social media. Somebody else did, and so we looked at that at the end of the day and said, this didn't happen for one reason or another. It garnered some social media attention. The third example that I'll give you is somebody reached out to me because a social media post about a cat hit on the freeway on the 101, and that a lot of people pulled over and were able to pull this cat out of the roadway. It was still alive. My officers allegedly responded and were very unprofessional, told the people who were upset that the cat was suffering that they could take it to the side of the road and shoot it. And so, mind you, I immediately got onto that because this part of the freeway is not Scottsdale PD jurisdiction. And so had internal affairs look into this and ultimately found out that it was not Scottsdale PD. It was another police department that responded to that call, and we had nothing to do with that. Now, unlike the other two posts, the poster, when we replied back to them and internal affairs got with them, actually did us a solid. They got on there, they posted, they said, this was not Scottsdale PD. My apologies for calling them into question. So here's the notion that I want to talk about. It's just kind of to wrap up, is that fake news, and a lot of this is fake news, and I hate to use that term has gotten so overused, but fake news has real world consequences for us. And so we pride ourselves on a great relationship with our community. I pride myself and organizationally as the chief of police on a high level of transparency. And so when we hear things like that, we're always going to look into those things. So just as a reminder that if you hear something like that and there's something negative that you're hearing about the Scottsdale Police Department or any other entity for that matter, friends, family, the threads that you're on, I would only ask that you call us. And unfortunately, I've gotten some calls and some emails of, hey, I heard this happened, and we get to the bottom of it and we resolve it. And if we've done wrong, and I deal with that. But in these instances, we didn't do wrong, or the crimes didn't happen. And so, but people start to believe that, and they begin to perpetuate that story, that idea, that myth out there, and that has consequences. Oftentimes has negative consequences for my officers. So, just a point of discussion. Just to let us know if you are hearing things, and please do so. If you hear something that's real negative about us, let me know. Call us. Call our non-emergency number 480-312-5000. Ask to be transferred to internal affairs, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, as opposed to trying to resolve the issue afterwards. Because once the story is out, people are going to believe what they're going to believe, and they don't care what the truth is. So the second thing before we get to Dr. Svoboda is a lot of discussion over the last month or two about Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. The report came out last week, about 70-plus page report came out last week related to the response to Uvalde. And over the last week, I've had a great opportunity my relationship with Dr. Scott Menzel, the Scottsdale Unified School District, to participate in their Administrators Academy last week, and then yesterday I had an opportunity to speak at both their back-to-school events with all of their teachers, their transportation folks, their administrators, and I got to speak at all three of those events, which was terrific, about Uvalde, about the report, and specifically about Scottsdale PD's response to active shooter, or what we call active killer events. And I just want to share with our listening community that, if you look at the report or you hear about the report, 376 individual officers, state, local, federal, responded to Robb Elementary School. Yet it took over 70 minutes for them to enter the classroom. And so I can't give you the reasoning behind that. I wasn't on scene. I wasn't the on-scene commander, but that typically is where the bottleneck starts, is with on-scene command and decisions made with on-scene commanders. So the decisions from the on-scene commanders, are definitely in question. They made decisions more in style with 23 years ago and the tactics of 23 years ago, around the time of Columbine High School and the shooting that took place there as well, which was to contain a shooter, surround it, and then call for a tactical team. That is old doctrine here in Scottsdale and certainly here in Arizona and largely around the country. And so how we train our folks, and again, I shared with SUSD this week and last week, is that although 376 officers responded to that incident at Robb Elementary School, the true number is what it takes is one. And that's what we train our folks, is that the first officer on scene immediately moves to the stimulus, and the stimulus in this case is gunfire. So that officer is not going to wait. If you wait, here's the issue, is that in an active killer scenario, one person is shot every 19 seconds and one person is killed every 48 seconds. So if Chris Coffey and I are the responding officers and I get there first and Chris gets on the radio and says, I'll be there in 60 seconds. I don't want to test your math, Chris, but how many people if I wait for Chris in that 60 seconds, how many people are shot during that time period?
3.
Yeah, 3. You're right. It's too many, and one person is killed during that time frame. So our officers understand and are trained that as soon as you get there, hey, it's great if you have a partner, but if you don't, move to the stimulus right now. It's your job to interrupt the thought process and the killing that's going on by getting that shooter to focus on the police. Chris, the person with body armor and weapon with extra ammunition. And so that's what I shared with SUSD. That's what I'm sharing with the community and the many speeches that I give and conversations that I have in the community. That's how we're trained. That's our expectation to move in when somebody is committing acts of violence against unarmed children or unarmed citizens or unarmed businesses. We're getting ready to do an active shooter training scenario with Cake Nightclub. And
next Wednesday.
Because like Pulse Nightclub in Orlando, we have a very large and robust nightlife in Scottsdale, many clubs in Scottsdale. And so we're working on active shooter scenarios in there with their staff in schools and the school districts. And so just to let the community know we're on top of this. We spend a lot of time working on these things and a lot of discussion about the lack of having a key to get into the classroom in Robb Elementary. And so we're a bit farther beyond that. We carry mechanical breaching equipment in all of our supervisors' vehicles. And then we're also moving into an explosive breaching program or shotgun breaching program in our patrol division. So that doors like that wouldn't impede us from getting in. So just want to let the community know. I know it can be a taboo topic. People are very upsetting, especially when it involves our young people and 19 students and 2 teachers killed in Uvalde. And we're trained and ready to go in a different way than I think that they were, or they chose not to employ. And so sad, but that's the world we live in today.
It is sad, but I hope our community knows that we do train this a lot. We do a lot of reality-based training, and shout out to Riot Group for helping us set this up for Wednesday, because they will also train staff in tourniquet training and run, hide, fight.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chief, for sharing that important message about social media posts and the issues that could arise when they are untrue or fabricated. If you hear or see something concerning or question its validity, never hesitate to reach out to us on our socials or call our non-emergency number at 480-312-5000. Now on to our guest for episode 12. He grew up in a small town of Wahoo, Nebraska. His background in the medical science field and great love of animals influenced his decision to pursue a career as a veterinarian. He received his Doctor of Veterinary Medicine in 1986 from Kansas State University. He enjoys both small animal and exotic pets medicine and surgery and has a special interest in police canines. He provides veterinary medical care for approximately 10 Valley law enforcement canine units. He routinely conducts canine first aid seminars for police officers, EMTs, and first responders. In his spare time, yes, he finds some, he is an avid runner and has competed in over 100 races in the last 10 years. Please welcome Dr. Wayne Svoboda to Shop Talk.
Great topic with Dr. Svoboda and about canines and taking care of animals and all that he's done for us. But let's get into that. Chris, why don't you lead us on?
I'm very excited to co-host this with you again. My honor to introduce Dr. Wayne, as I call him. I've known him for about 15 years, and so just excited to introduce him to our listeners. And why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with police canines?
I came into the Valley around 1988, and at that time, there was a Dr. Dean Rice, who actually was the veterinarian that was providing some medical education for the officers. Up until that point, most of the time, it was just take them to your family vet. And these guys would look at these dogs and not really know what was going on. And I joined Mesa Veterinary Hospital in 1988, and Dr. Ken Jeffrey, at the time, he was the leader of that whole organization. Scottsdale and Mesa PD decided to start their canine programs, and they chose that hospital because at that time that was the only hospital in the Valley that was 24/7.
Okay.
So they had emergency backup and all things. Well, the interesting thing is that the dogs from back then and the dogs that are today, much, much different.
Right.
And so his protocol, not my protocol, because again, I was just a grunt at that point working. But his protocol was the minute those dogs walked in, we knocked them out. We basically sedated them and we do dental. So his protocol is you bring those dogs in every 6 months. We would sedate them, do on them, and kind of do our exam. And to me, that was not the way to do it.
Yeah.
And so eventually I got sent to one of the satellite clinics, and it was here in Scottsdale. And I was assigned primarily to ScottsdalePD. So I really have to thank ScottsdalePD for creating where we're at as of today. Absolutely. So I basically started to see more medical cases from the ScottsdalePD dogs, and it got to the point where, golly, here's a dog with hypothyroidism. I need to get some blood tests in 30 days. What am I going to do? Knock this dog out? And so the solution was, and really the nice thing with the officers is that they said, hey, you'd like to come out and work out and see what we do on training nights, that would be great. And it's like, that's the solution. Yeah. So I actually started working out on Wednesday nights with these guys. And lo and behold, the dogs accepted me as one of them. So now we're training these dogs with uniform recognition so that, if there's officers from even different agencies and other things, these dogs are not going to bite the officers. They're going to continue to stay on target. Well, I recognized that way back in 88.
Yeah.
And so it really made it easier for me to work with these dogs. And also, like I said, the personality of dogs back then was basically, let's get the meanest, baddest dog you could possibly find.
Yeah.
And a lot of officers got chewed up.
It should be, for our listeners, all of our dogs come from Europe. They're titled dogs through the Royal KNPV training. And so we would go out to California.
What's KNPV?
That's it's just KNPV. Doc. It's the Royal.
We in law enforcement, we love our TLAs,
exactly.
Our 3-letter acronyms. This one's a four-letter acronyms.
Yeah. It's just the Royal Dutch titling.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're all sporting dogs when they come from Europe. So we go out to California, and our vendor has 20 dogs for agencies to look at. We'll select one and bring them back. And first thing we do is drop them off at docs to see how their hips are, their teeth are, if they have any other issues. So
I think you make a great point about it used to be dogs were mean, like you were going for like an aggressive dog, but today it's
the mentality back then was we need to have a very strong street dog.
Yep.
And risk management kind of learned that you don't. I mean, basically we would rather have a dog that wants to satisfy the handler, do what the handler wants to have done. So we've completely changed. We got dogs that are now, I hate to say, almost like family pets.
Yeah.
Whereas the old mentality was, we're going to throw him in a cage. He's not going to have any pleasure except to go to work.
Right.
Even the compulsion drive for these dogs used to be, I hate to say it, we used to nickname it Edison medicine with shock collars and things like that. They're still used, I think, for mostly legality issues and things, but for training, it's really not. It's more of a positive training. They want these dogs to not look at the handler as an adversary, but more as a complementary type of thing.
True partner.
True, yeah. And so they're when you come in and you're trying to take him off with a bite, he's going to say, he's not going to take this away from me. He's here to help me, and then I will release it because he's going to reward me positively.
Having Doc come out to our trainings really helped the partnership. And then again, for us, if one of the dogs got injured during training, I mean, we had the staff right there to help. So I remember one of my first trainings, we were out at the corp yard. One of my dogs stepped on a nail, went through his paw, and you guys were there and took charge and wrapped him up, and we continued training. So
it's been very helpful with the training, even with all the training scenarios we've been in, to understand how these dogs are actually used. Most veterinarians will look at it like, well, how do you step on the nail? How'd you let that happen? And it's like, well, you have to understand how these guys are deployed. And so it's been very valuable experience for me to be with the officers and kind of go side by side with them during training. So I don't know how other veterinarians can actually provide really good service. I mean, even for a recovering dog from surgery, I know how these dogs are going to be used. And of course, the officer's first question is going to be, when can I start training with him again? And I know how the process goes. I also know the different things like, obedience level versus bite work versus detection, civil fines. I know all that stuff, and I can incorporate that into their recovery.
So Mesa and Scottsdale were the first two agencies that kind of went to you, and then it kind of grew from there, and more and more Valley agencies then started coming to you. And then where did the medical kits come from? Because
the interesting thing with those two agencies, we are now assisting or consultants for over 60 agencies.
Wow.
So we
is that all in Arizona, or is that outside of Arizona?
Outside also, even federal, like TSA. So we've really we've put our name out there so that if anybody ever has any questions, any officer, they can contact me. I give out my personal cell phone number, so these guys can call if there was an accident in Colorado. One of those officers took one of my first aid classes, could actually call me and say, hey, this is what the hospital is saying or the doctor is saying. What does it really mean?
Right.
And I'll give them the exact answer. Or if I don't have the answer, I can kind of look it all up and eventually get back to them and say, here's what they're trying to accomplish with your dog.
So it was really, I think, a labor of love that you got into working with the canines and then just evolved from there.
I'm curious, you mentioned, Chris, the canine first aid handler kit, or the canine handler first aid kit. I'm curious about that and that development and how you got to that point.
Well, there was a need. Basically, Scottsdale PD said, okay, we are having these kind of injuries and we need something to be able to repair the dogs, or at least to stabilize them before we could transport them to, at that time, Mesa Veterinary Hospital. And so I started researching it out and asking questions. Okay, this is what we need, what we don't need. There's lots of things that fall into this whole thing, and that is there's only so much real estate within a police vehicle.
Right.
So I can't include the whole closet of my hospital in there. So I had to pick items that would actually work fairly well for them and something that was going to be used. there's also that one little thin note of these are officers. And
they're not professionals in the medical aspect of it.
So I need to put stuff in that first aid kit that they can't screw up.
Right.
Because if they have any hesitation that they're going to treat their dog and injure it or overdose it or anything like that, they're going to hesitate, and I can't afford that.
Right.
So basically, everything in that first aid kit was kind of designed similar to a camping trip. Everything's got to have three purposes. Number two, it could be used on the officer, let alone the dog.
Right.
So dual purpose. The quick clot. If my dog gets hurt, I can pack the wound. If my officer or decoy or somebody else gets hurt, they can utilize that. Same with the bandage material and other things. There are some items in there that you're not going to use on a human, like the apomorphine.
Right.
That stuff is designed for if the dogs go ahead and get some kind of poison. Say somebody throws a meatball over the wall and they get it, or they come in contact with something. It serves a purpose there. But it's also saved a lot of dogs.
Yes.
Like, for example, they would go out to California for training at Adlerhurst.
Yes.
And occasionally these dogs would chew up their leash,
Yeah.
and they'd swallow it, and I get a phone call saying, okay, my dog ate a leash.
Wow.
You're out there in another state with your dog, and he's going to possibly have a foreign body unless we can get it out of his stomach. In the kit, the first aid kit has apomorphine, and they can induce vomiting, get rid of all that stuff, and save.
I've done that.
Yeah, that happens.
It's awesome.
I've had officers call me on Thanksgiving. My dog just ate a Beanie Baby. That could cause an obstruction. Well, let's get it out. Apomorphine. Here we go. So.
Yeah, the medical kit is phenomenal, and it really gives you a peace of mind in the training that you do and all the training classes that you've done. It's a peace of mind. So, again, if one of our dogs ingests marijuana or, another substance, then at least we can treat them to get them stable till we get them to you or an emergency vet. So,
before Narcan was available in the spray, intranasal,
right.
My kits had Narcan in it.
Yep.
Again, Narcan can be used on the dog, can be used on the officer, and it's one of those situations that what's in that kit, they cannot screw up. They can't overdose their dog. And these products are very, very safe from a medical standpoint.
So you started with doing the medical kits, and I think, do you know how many medical kits over the years you've done? I mean,
we've done a little research on that, and we were up to well over 800 kits.
Wow.
Since I started doing all this stuff, and understand that you can restock these things. So one of our programs is, even in the last 5 years, we've restocked, putting new medications that had expiration dates, rebandaging material. We've done over the last 5 years just 153 of these things. So and still counting for this year. Wow. So it's kind of a service that you don't need to keep buying a brand new kit, which puts a lot of expense on the departments. We can go in there, see what's expired, what's been used. Some officers will keep them in the back of their vehicles, which we try to tell them not to put the medications in. But they can hit 120 degrees in those vehicles, and so. But the kits are designed to be able to take that kind of abuse and still be functional.
So in the time that, you've been doing this for 30 years with us anyway, you start to see kind of that differing dogs, but you really become a specialist in the Belgian Malinois, since that's what most police agencies are going to. Is that just, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, fortunately, that my exposure has been that. Like, for example, we just saw 3 police dogs yesterday. And so, majority of them are Malinois, but, obviously the German Shepherds, the Dutch Shepherds. And it's important for me as a veterinarian providing the services for these departments to understand the personalities and how those dogs are used. So, you can have a German Shepherd. They're good dogs, but they tend to be kind of smart. If they go into a room, if they don't find anything, well, the next time they go in the room, they know there's nothing in there. They're going to kind of give up. You're a Belgian Malinois, a little bit higher drive. And then, of course, your street dogs can be your Dutch Shepherds, which, sometimes I need that handler to be able to control that dog to be able to do a full examination. Yeah. So because of that, I've become very knowledgeable in some of their very specific medical issues. Again, your German Shepherd's going to have more genetic issues, the hips, the back, elbows. I like my Mals because, they're very versatile. very rugged, and they have less medical issues, allergies, like, your German Shepherds have the allergies, these guys don't. And so, again, that's extra expense that's going to come out of the budget for the police departments.
Yeah. We've been getting some different dogs lately for our crisis canines.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you treat those dogs
we
too.
treat those guys. Chase,
Rocket, and Captain.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's a new one.
Yes.
That they were deciding. Scottsdale Unified School District yesterday was working on deciding, picking from 5 different names what the name of the new crisis canine is going to be. And I think, what are those breeds?
I think those are doodles.
Yes, there's some doodle.
There's I think Chase is a
Labradoodle. I think some
lab.
are, one had lab and then other Labradoodles.
Right, Labradoodles, golden doodles.
Golden doodles, yeah.
Yeah.
I've always joked with you guys when we went out to select dogs in California. On the way back, these guys would be saying, "Well, I think I'm going to name him Thunder," or something like that. Yeah, and it's like, okay, if you're going to change the name of the dog, I think the rule should be we should also change the name of the officer.
Right.
So just to avoid confusion for the pet,
right,
kind of thing, or the canine.
So Chief, the really interesting thing is the education and the classes that Doc puts on, and the Valley Canine Agencies do an officer survival seminar up in Prescott every year. And they've started incorporating Doc into those scenarios. So they'll do a down dog or an injured dog. Doc shows up and says, "Okay, where's your medical kit and what do you do?" So in times of stress, then that's how we, again, figure out what to do with the dogs. And so, but even now with, there's an active robot dog.
Diesel, that was donated by Circle K.
Okay.
Excellent learning tool. So, like, for example, when I went out to Yuma to teach a basic class as well as SWAT EMT, gosh, back then we had to utilize some of their own personal canines in order to...
Or your dog.
Or my dog, yeah.
Right.
And so it's a lot different when you're trying to bandage a real dog, or you're trying to put a catheter in, or teaching the SWAT EMTs how to intubate.
Wow.
You have to have real life experience.
Yeah.
Well, this dog helps to replace that. This dog is great. It bleeds to the point where the owners or the handlers have to put a tourniquet on. It barks, it growls. So if they forget to put a medical muzzle on the dog, we remind the officers that we don't want you to become a second casualty here. The dog's going to turn around and bite you. Even if he loves you, he is still potentially going to bite you if he hurts. So we teach all the basic skills through this whole process. And the nice thing with this is, with this scenario we were doing up in Prescott this last week, is we were putting the pressure on these officers, saying, okay, here's all the stuff we taught you, how to fix a broken leg or stabilize it so you can transport it to the emergency facility. And, oh, by the way, you have 3 minutes to put that bandage on starting right now. I mean, he's going to have to move this dog because he's right in an area that there may be gunfire or a hostile environment. So he needs to move this dog, and he needs to move it quickly. So, yes, we put the extra pressure on. But
that's amazing. You know, we have really transitioned over the last 2 decades into reality-based training for our officers, and downed officer rescue, and not treating downed officers. And so it's just amazing, you know, that we have the robot dog Diesel to do that level of training and really put the pressure on. That's reality-based training, I think, at its finest. It
is. It's phenomenal training, because then it does translate into helping our community. If we find a down dog in a neighborhood or on the 101,
right,
we have the medical kit and we can assist. So the other thing is I think it's important to, why do we go to this expense? Why do we do all these things for these dogs? And it's because we have a lot of time and money invested in the dogs. I mean, this is a very valuable piece of equipment. So
very much so. I mean, people may not realize that just purchasing one of these dogs, we're talking about a Schitzen trained dog that's got some of the basics in there, but not fine-tuned, $13,000.
Just for the dog.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's important for me when I see these dogs to do a post-purchase exam, make sure they're structurally solid, they don't have any kind of medical issues, and then we basically will go from that point on. Then all the training that the officers have to put in. I mean, every Wednesday night, 4 hours of training.
Right.
That's a financial amount that the department is putting into these dogs.
Yep.
So we got to keep these dogs in the fight for as long as we can, 9 years if we can, and that's kind of where my role comes in.
You know, it's just interesting, Chris, that you talk about, and I think, you know, you have people who I think are getting a greater understanding of police canines. You use a term, you refer to them as a tool, right? And
Yes.
and Dr. Svoboda talks about their cost, and that initial cost of $13,000. I think sometimes people bristle at the idea when we refer to a dog as a tool, but that's what they are. And so it's not that they're, for our listeners, it's not that they're not, I mean, they're extremely well taken care of. They get an amazing amount of training. They wind up being, largely as like family members to our canine officers. So they're treated amazing, but they are also an amazing tool, and they have been since the dawn of man and warfare. Dogs have been used as tools. And so they're an amazing tool for us in the Scottsdale Police Department and the law enforcement profession. But I know that, you know, people are like, oh, it's not. That's a live animal. That's not your. No, it is.
They enjoy. They enjoy what they do.
Yes,
and,
perfect.
And even if I hire somebody to come and put a ceiling fan up, he's a tool for me because I couldn't do it.
Yes.
Right.
And these dogs, it's like I can go through a window like that.
Yeah.
And so basically, they enjoy doing what they're doing. Their tail is wagging when they're doing this kind of stuff.
That's what I mean. They're a working dog. They need a job,
and we're supplying them with that job. Otherwise, you throw them in a cage, and oh my God, they're just going to try to chew their way out, break off every tooth.
Yeah.
So let's put that in a positive light for the dog.
Absolutely, amazing animal, amazing tool for us, and you just know we get a lot of hate mail on occasion when we talk. People see our dogs and who don't understand exactly
these dogs
what
enjoy what they're doing.
Yes.
Well, and they should know that they're, and Chief, you talk about they're very well taken care of. You know, in our vehicles during the summer, the AC is always on. We have alarm systems. The officers now have on their phone, they can look and see exactly what the temperature of the car is. If something happens with the vehicle, there's an alarm, windows roll down. So, I mean, we take every precaution to keep them safe.
Yeah, I'd argue that these are some of the happiest, best taken care of dogs anywhere in the world.
Yes. Yeah.
And you know, we teach classes on heat injury,
right? Heat stroke,
recognition of issues. So if you have a dog who's trying to ignore you while you're playing ball, and all of a sudden he starts going off to the side and laying down, he might be telling you that, hey, you're kind of pushing the limit here. I need to rest. I need to cool myself down. These guys are miniature swamp coolers. Right. So basically we need to teach these officers, and they're very good about it. Recognitions, hey, I put my dog up. You know, some of the departments like MCSO, we've actually put microchips into them so that they can quickly scan them. And they can actually tell whether the dog is overheating or not.
Wow.
And some of the things that I provide in my first aid lectures is that a normal, healthy dog, sure, they can jack their temperature up to 106, 107. Border Patrol do the same thing.
Right.
But a healthy dog without medical issues should be able to get that temperature back down when they're put into the vehicle within about 20 minutes.
Okay.
If they can't, then again, what I've instructed these officers, if the temperature is still high, let's say 40 minutes later, you need to bring them to me. There's some kind of medical issue, whether it be laryngeal paralysis or some type of heart issue or something like that. And that has brought lots of dogs to my facility to early diagnosis of issues.
We need to look into the chip issue.
I know. I didn't know that. Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah, Home Again has a chip it's a new microchip. It gives you a microchip number, but it also conveniently has a temperature on it.
Wow.
And so you just wave a wand at it, and the dog will come up with a temperature, and
That's
you know
awesome.
right away.
That is for the summer. I mean,
yeah.
Because I think these dogs will work until they'll go and go and go.
They want to please. They want to please.
So they're so high drive that they'll ignore pain to get the job done, and then when the job's done, then that's when they crash. Yeah. So we have to be careful about that.
And with the high humidity we're having right now with the monsoons, again, they're miniature swamp coolers. So how efficient is your swamp cooler right now with a 50% humidity? Not very
at all.
efficient.
Yeah.
So again, there's some of the things that we teach our officers.
We wanted to take a small break to talk about the upcoming canine trials in October. For more info, here is Officer Sanborn.
Hey everybody, it's Tony with the Canine Unit. We have the Desert Dog Canine Trials and Public Safety Expo. We're going to be at Westworld again, October 22nd and 23rd. Every canine unit in the Valley will be participating, so there's plenty of opportunity to cheer on their favorite city.
Besides, Doc coming out to all the trainings and the officer survival seminars and just doing that, he's also the lead in our Desert Dog Canine Trials, which will be in October. Up at Westworld. So again, he's up there making sure that all the dogs are safe, and if they get injured, it takes care of them, and that's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's this is kind of nice that we're going to be indoors versus like when we were out at Goodyear and it was like 90 degrees. And in that situation, we run the dogs out for the scenario, bring them back in, and immediately put them in kiddie pools to try to cool them down.
Yeah.
And that year, we had zero problems because, again, we recognized what the problems were going to be. And then we're proactive instead of reactive to the whole thing. So.
I do laugh because one year at the competitions, my dog Havoc, great dog, had an injury, and so Doc gave him some medicine and stitched him up, and I went back out on the field, and he won that event. Of course, everybody.
I'm still getting grief from that from all the other officers.
Right. They think Doc did something to him, so
they doped him.
Exactly,
blood doping.
He did. So.
My theory is that with one of the medications, it's kind of a pain medication, and he had lower anxiety, so he performed better.
Right.
Of course, the officers was still able to detect it.
Havoc was a very interesting dog. When I would bring him in to Doc, we either have to do the exam in the parking lot. Or I'd have to hold him because he was not
happy about it. I'll tell you, Westworld, though, in the canine competition being out at Westworld last year, and now it's going to be there this year, what a great location. Massive indoor area, air AC, conditioned. It's the perfect location in the for the canine competition. So excited to see that again this year.
And kudos to our city manager because he really helped facilitate that. So, we thank him for that.
Excellent shout out to Jim Thompson.
And
good
Westworld.
job, Chris. Good job.
Yeah, and Westworld too.
Westworld, yeah.
Love them up there. So
absolutely.
Chris kind of raised an interesting point on Havoc is that Havoc had a certain personality. And I'm kind of one of those guys that don't give me problems, give me solutions. And so we actually came up with ways of dealing with some of these difficult dogs that may be just one person oriented. And so one of them was picking the dog up, lifting him up off the floor, and then I could do the examination. I could draw blood. I could do things like that. I do have several dogs out there that are just one handler type of dogs, and we have to come up with a protocol to be able to safely handle those. And some officers will actually write down the protocol in their cell phone, and that way if they are forced to go to an emergency facilities because of an injury, they can hand that to the doctor and say, this is what works. If you follow what Dr. Svoboda says, you will not get injured.
Wow.
So.
And kudos to your staff, too, because they do a good job as well. And so dealing with these dogs.
That's a good transition. Let's maybe talk about at least one other person on your staff. It sounds like your son is... Your son is following in your footsteps.
Yes, it's a great thing. Everybody's like, do you really want to work with your son? And he's my boss now, basically. But it's great because one of the things that has always been a problem for me is what happens when I retire.
Right.
Because seriously, part of my reason I get up every morning and come to work is to actually work with the police dogs.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he's my succession, basically.
That's great.
And I feel very good that the police departments and everything will be taken care of when I retire because he's been there with me. He's listened to everything I say, how I question the officers, knowing how the dogs are deployed and everything. And so that's an invaluable experience that just a common veterinarian would never be exposed to.
And I remember Ryan, Dr. Ryan, coming out before, to our trainings before he went to college and was out there. And then he's also came to my last buying trip down to Adlerhurst, California. And actually he helped us get Hannah, which was one of our phenomenal dogs. And so because of Dr. Ryan, they they handed to us because they were going to give them to a different agency.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Ryan.
He's grown up with it. I mean, I'm sure just, over the 30 years and the stories you've come home and interacting with you, and I mean, it has to have just made such an impact on him. He said, I want to be like my dad. That's super cool.
And the interesting thing is that you now kind of stand back and you go, wow, he is actually a very good veterinarian, and he thinks very well through processes and stuff. So, he's going to be a great succession.
Yeah, that's awesome. Taking care of a whole new generation of police dogs.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So I guess we have a couple questions. A lot of people ask, with these movies that are coming out, Dog and some other stuff, are Belgian Malinois good pets for a family?
My quick answer would be no. Or you really need to do your research on these dogs.
Yes.
It depends on your skill level with training of dogs. This is not like a golden retriever where I can throw him in the backyard and he'll raise himself and he'll still be a good dog and I can trust he's not going to bite the kids or anything like that. You need to have almost like a sergeant type of mentality of sit, stay down, come kind of thing. This dog needs structure. He thrives on that. He's not, if you don't give him structure, you may not like how he's going to train you. Right. So, the other thing is that I have a she's a flunky from Search and Rescue. She's a lab crossed with a Dutch Shepherd, and sweetest dog in the world. But that breeding program didn't work because the Dutch Shepherd part of it made the dogs a little bit higher drive and would actually go up the lead and bite the handlers.
Wow.
And these are handlers that are not accustomed to biting dogs because they've been around golden retrievers and labs and things like that. And so when I adopted her, it was kind of like, well, if she bites the grandkids or anything like that, I can't have this.
Right.
And she did turn out to be the sweetest dog in the world, and she's a great running companion with me. So I love that. But, she was destructive initially. I did some of the training myself, and I'm not going to be saying I'm an expert here. I actually ended up doing a trade of services with people that kind of know these dogs, and she came back a totally new dog. And so, matter of fact, when we run, I don't even have to put a leash on her. She is right there by my knee. But that's a success story.
Right.
But it took a lot of work, a lot of money, so to speak, if you call the trade of services and things.
Right.
And so I usually will tell people that, you want to be careful about that. It's like having a Ferrari to go get your groceries.
Right.
Do you really need that?
That's great.
But we, on my dog Betty, we have this, it's called the whistle. It basically tracks how much activity she does for the day. And this is that I can do an 8-mile run with and then come back. It's the first thing in the morning, and the next thing you know, she's running all day long, and she can have well over 240 minutes, so 4 hours of activity. Wow. Do you have that much time to wear this dog out?
Correct.
In your day is where I'm going.
Right.
So
that I think that's a great transition into a question, because you see people, I think, get the wrong dog all the time. And so what is the one piece of advice you can give to pet owners about A, selecting a pet or dog, and B, then their health care moving forward?
Well, selecting the dogs, there's some of the basic things that we'll talk about. Again, it's what do you want this dog for? Do you want something to show off a dog? That's probably not the best thing to do. You want something that you want to research out. What's your family situation? Are you going to have grandkids coming over? You want something that you can trust. Sometimes a dog is like a gun on the coffee table. And so do you trust everybody to leave that gun alone, or would you like to have something that it's going to be a little bit more trustable?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you want to be careful about that kind of thing. But you can do certain things, like when my daughter was selecting a Great Dane, I went in there and I was taking all these puppies. I'd roll them on their back. I'd be touching their feet. I'd be opening their mouth. I want a dog that's going to be allowing me to do all that thing.
Right.
And you can sometimes take these Belgian Malinois, you can try to do that, and all they want to do is nip at your fingers. And, yeah. And do you feel like you have enough skill level to train that out? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at how much time do I have, how much skill do I have, and then you're looking at, is this really the right dog for me? Would I rather have a cuddly little golden retriever that I could wrap around and do our things?
Okay.
And so, and then as far as like medical advice, I sometimes have to fall back on what we do for the police departments. One of our assets is that we do annual exams on these dogs. And we make recommendations of doing all this preventative care, and that kind of helps keeping these dogs out of trouble. There have been some of the departments that have decided to come to see me, and their veterinarian would be like, well, we don't need to run these particular tests unless there are clinical signs. And so what I do is I run, it's called a desert disease profile. We run for like valley fever, tick fever, things like that. You'd be surprised how many of these police dogs come up positive from year to year for valley fever. And so we're catching that stuff. I mean, would you rather catch the grape juice dripping on your white carpet early or after the whole pitcher is on there? So that's been kind of the magic. We had one department come over and nobody was being tested. We tested them. 3 of those dogs were positive for valley fever, and that was just percolating very slowly to the point where it gets so bad, we're going to have to retire this asset and start all over again. Versus, no, I catch it now. We're going to start them on medications and hopefully drive it out.
Yeah, that's great.
So even Chris's dog right now.
Yeah. So I do have a personal Malinois, and it's my second, and boy, they take a lot of time. But thank God for Doc, because it had got bit by a rattlesnake and got valley fever, and but we're treating it, and
prognosis is going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
But most people would just kind of go, well, you probably just got hip dysplasia or something like that.
Right.
So.
This is really interesting, Chris. I'm just going to point out as a side note, our listeners don't know all the disaster that your microphone's been here at the show today, and the wiring and the microphone itself, and Steve, our
technical
advisor, had to fix everything. And now that I hear about your dog, bit by a rattlesnake and valley fever.
Right. Maybe it's just me.
There's a common denominator here.
Right. Me.
It's you.
Right. It's me. It's me.
Sorry, I just had to.
But you have to say that the training that you picked up in my class allowed him to react appropriately.
Thank God for you, Doc. Otherwise, Chris would be a total disaster.
That's right.
Would be. So it was very complimentary to Doc, because when I brought my dog in, and I'm like, I know my dog has valley fever, and your staff was like, well, how do you know that? I mean, how do you didn't do an x-ray? And I'm like, I know, because Doc taught me. Sure enough, we did an x-ray, and Doc's like, you're absolutely right. And I'm like, I've done that before. I'm absolutely right. Thank you, Doc. I appreciate that.
So,
that's great.
So my son's thinking about hiring him.
Right.
So.
Exactly.
So you're an avid runner.
I am.
Yeah, I see that in your bio and all that. So
did you catch that? He's like, an 8-mile run.
Yeah, I went on a short 8-mile run.
Right.
I do it
at
for
a 5-minute mile pace.
Right.
I do it for the dog.
Yeah.
When you get that cold nose that kind of wakes you up in the morning saying, you're going to run today, right? I mean, you're not taking a day off.
How many marathons have you run?
Marathons, only 2.
Okay.
So I've done the Chicago, and I've also done P.F. Chang Rock and Roll here in Arizona. Good. Trying to get into New York City and all that other business, but because it's on a lottery,
yes,
I didn't get it again this year. So,
but you've run, and your son too have run a bunch of races.
Yep. Yeah. If I kind of at one time I looked back to I think 2011. From 2011 to today, I've run over 135 races.
Wow.
So, and all those include the 2 marathons, tons of half marathons, 10Ks, 5Ks, mud races. We do several triathlons. So it's all kind of dabbled in all those different areas.
Do you have a favorite distance or a favorite race that you like?
Favorite distance? I really kind of like the half marathon.
Yeah.
Marathons are a little tough, but like I said, I save myself for those when I get the name ones.
Yeah.
But the half, I really love those. My most favorite was the Jack and Jill half marathon at Seattle, Washington. That's where I got my PR of 1:38, and loved it.
1:38.
1:38. Wow. Yeah.
That's great.
So
But Doc's won a lot of races for your age group.
I have, and I'm about to move into the next age group, which I'm looking forward to because I figured
What's the next age
Oh,
group?
gosh.
You can dominate.
Yeah, 65 on. But
Wow.
But basically, I've always told people that I'm a winner because I'm outliving my competition. So.
That's great.
One of the Doc and I did a run together with dogs, and it was
that was fun.
That was fun. It was kind of like a Spartan mud race.
Yep.
And so,
But we also did some training with the officers.
Yes.
It was kind of a team building thing.
Yeah.
So what are you running every day? Do you take any days off? And what's your daily mileage that you're doing?
Well, right now probably between 3 and 4 miles, like every other day, and then weekends is a long run that we go up to 6 to 8.
Okay.
That's going to be escalating as I get closer to the marathon time. So right now it's kind of a maintenance with this high temperature that we're running into, and I also have to be real careful bringing it back to the dogs.
Right.
Again, Betty's a swamp cooler here, so I've got to make sure that I'm not overextending it.
Yeah.
We get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get our run done.
Yeah.
So, and then, like I said, the weekends are the long runs. So
That's great.
But then so I'll do that like every other day, 4 times a week basically, and then I'll interject just to kind of keep my edge on if I'm going to do a triathlon. I got my swimming, like 2,000 yard swim, and then bicycling periodically.
You doing a pool swim, or are you doing?
I go to EOs and do a
EOS
little
and swim in
bit.
their pool. Yeah.
Swim back and forth. But it's fun to go out to like Sorrel Lake and just swim, open water swim.
You did one down in Tempe. Didn't you swim in Tempe Town Lake?
I was not one of the bodies they pulled out. So.
It's like a giant toilet bowl.
Yeah. You just don't. You get past it. You just get past it and you go. So.
Well, Doc, thanks for being with us today and joining us on the show. I learned a lot, and I've been in this organization. I started 28 years ago, and fortunately I have great friends like Chris who kind of clue me in on our canines and our dogs. But I learned a lot. Have never been a very like a dog, an animal person, and so I'm always fascinated to learn more and more about what our canine companions can do. And so really thank you for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me, guys.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for everything that you do for all the Valley agencies.
Yeah. To our listeners, thanks for being with us again. We'll have another great guest next month as well. Until that time, make sure we take care of each other. I know I talk about at the end of every program, a lot of craziness going on out there, a lot of crimes, a lot of violence. Just make sure heads on a swivel, you're taking care of one another, and be diligent of your surroundings. And send us questions. Let us know what you're thinking, and we'll answer those every chance we get. So every day offers us each the opportunity to be more in the service of one another. So do great things, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for listening in to Shop Talk episode 12. We hope you enjoyed hearing about Dr. Svoboda. He's a great guy, and we're so lucky to have him caring for our dogs. Is there something you'd like to ask Chief Walther? Send it to us on any of our social media pages at ScottsdalePD, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, and we'll get him to answer it on a future episode. We look forward to bringing you another great episode next month. Until then, remember to be more.